Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What are some unexplained events or phenomena that you've seen in real life? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. It was around 3 or 4 in the morning, and I woke up in the middle of the night per usual. As a teen, I probably woke up in my bed 4 to 5 times a night, every night. Half asleep, I look at the clock to see what time it is. It's around 3:30. I then look at my doorway across the room and realize that my door is open. And there in the darkness, I make out a silhouette of a person standing there facing me in the middle of the doorway. At first I think it's Dad or Grandfather, as sometimes they get up a lot, and I caught my grandfather watching me sleep a couple times. Creepy, I know, but that's for another time. A few seconds pass, and I start to freak out. I stop believing it's anyone in the house, and the moment I scrutinize it further, the silhouette runs toward my bed with its arms flailing. I am proverbially shitting my pants at this point, and I just shut my eyes out of fear, open them after another few seconds, and see nothing there. I close the door, turn the light on, and watch TV for the rest of the night. When I went to Ireland in the spring of 2000 for a school trip, we were staying at a hotel in this little town by a beach. Everyone on the trip ended up going to this club to party it up, and my girlfriend and I, along with another couple, went to a nearby casino arcade to play some games. We played for a bit and called it an early night and made our way back to the hotel. Everyone else was still out partying. The next day we all wake up for breakfast, pack our bags, and get back on the bus. Everyone is there except for one guy, Gilbert. The chaperones start freaking out, thinking Gilbert may have wandered into the ocean while he was drunk and drowned. He wasn't in his room or in anyone else's room, so the hotel management starts going floor to floor and room by room looking for Gilbert. The girls on the bus start crying, expecting the worst. The adults are all freaking out. After about an hour, they find Gilbert. He's exactly 1 floor up from the room he was supposed to be in, 615 instead of 515, for example. Nobody knows how he got into his room, and that room was not rented out. The floor was empty except for one other guest. Everybody, including the staff, was baffled. A few months ago, I was at home chilling in my living room, and I saw an intense flash of light fill up the living room for a brief moment, followed by a boom that sounded like a cross between thunder and an explosion. It shook the house and set off car alarms in the neighborhood. Other neighbors heard it too, and we stepped outside to see what had caused it. There wasn't a sign or anything having caused this. Not a cloud in the sky, no contrails overhead, or jet noises before the boom, no indication of an explosion. It was just so random. The thing that bothers me is not so much the boom, but the flash of light. It was in the middle of the day, so it had to have been pretty bright to lighten up my living room more than it already was. Additionally, I have some thick-ass wooden blinds that will keep most light out. So, for light to have gotten past them, whatever the flash was, it was bright. About 10 years ago, my mom was on a vacation, and I drove the hour to her house and stayed over one night so I could take care of the place and do a few chores while she was gone. She had moved into the place about 2 years before, and I had never stayed the night there before. I was the only one in the house, so I made dinner, watched TV, and went to bed. Totally normal stuff. I should note here that my mom is a huge clutter junkie. She has knickknacks out of the wazoo, covering every surface in her house. Anyway, when I woke up in the morning, everything from the mantle over her living room fireplace, probably 24 knickknacks, were on the floor, arranged in a perfect circle. I was so confused, I felt funny about telling anyone about it, but I called my mom and told her, and she said that it had happened occasionally ever since she moved in, but had never told anyone. She said it happened in different rooms sometimes, but it was always just a playful rearrangement of stuff. She said she called it teaser. The fact that she had a name for it creeped me out. She still lives in the house, but reports that over the years, it started slowing down and now doesn't happen anymore. I don't really believe in ghosts, but have no explanation for this at all. One night a couple of years ago, I was in my room having gone to bed at an unreasonably early hour. I was living in my parents' house at the time, but I was the only one there. As I was drifting to sleep, I heard someone walking around downstairs and some rustling about. This was strange since I could have sworn I had set my house alarm, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I was too tired to investigate, so in my mind I told myself that maybe one of my sisters was coming home or my grandparents were staying over. I'm sure my mom had mentioned it, but it's rare that I listened to her drone on and on about whatever banality she had called me about that day. I listened to the noises long enough to decide that whomever was there wasn't stealing anything and probably wasn't a threat. The next day I woke up and stumbled into the bathroom at about 8 a.m. to start my morning routine. As I lifted the toilet seat up, I found a giant turd that someone had clearly left sitting there a few hours. And this thing was huge. Baby arm huge. I dry heaved for a moment before I realized that not only was there a giant piece of shit in my toilet, but no toilet paper as well. I did a quick wipe check to see if maybe I had started to sleep shit with an amazing degree of accuracy, but it came back clean. I instantly went from confusion to outrage, since this meant that whoever came into my house last night decided that they were familiar enough with my domicile to shit in my bathroom and not even have the decency to flush. I barged into my sister's room to start yelling her awake, only to find the bed empty and still freshly made. I went down the hall to my parents' room, figuring maybe she opted for the California King as opposed to a paltry twin extra long. Same situation, freshly made, undisturbed. At this point, I'm thinking one of my grandparents was playing a strangely elaborate trick on me. Their bad hips prevent them from moving quickly up and down our curved staircase, so if either of them use my bathroom, it would have had to have been out of spite rather than necessity. I walked downstairs into our guest room to poke my head in and see if anyone was there, but no such luck. At this point, I'm completely befuddled. I go to the front door to see if there are any cars out front that I could recognize, but when I open the door, the house alarm went off. I froze for a moment before closing the door, turning off the alarm, and spending the next 20 minutes in the shower trying to figure out how the phantom poo had arrived at its destination. For my story, I had an aunt and uncle who lived in a haunted house. So my uncle, I'll call him Kyle, and my aunt, Jenny, and these are actual names, were moving out of my grandmother's house because they finally had the money to do it, and had a child on the way. They moved into a little house in a place called Little Russia in Topeka, Kansas, which is a place where Russian immigrants migrated to in whatever time or wherever. It's next to a bridge, a small 4-block neighborhood with tiny houses. Anyways, while Jenny was pregnant with their first and only child, she took maternity leave for 3 to 4 months before her daughter was born, while Kyle continued working. She was alone in the house for most of the days and started hearing things in their cellar or basement, which was really a trap door in the middle of their kitchen that leads to a dugout cellar sort of thing. Dirt on the walls, sometimes foundation, dirt floor, that sort of thing. She was hearing movement and motion, the common things that can be easily explained by water pipes and gas heaters and whatnot, but she was absolutely convinced that there was someone living in their cellar. Kyle told her fairly frequently that she was going crazy, and there was no one in the cellar, but she wouldn't budge on her opinion, and so it went for the next month or two. Finally, they had their daughter, and brought her back home after a few days in the hospital. The first night back, she unsurprisingly cried like babies do. Kyle and Jenny were awoken by it, and decided they would let her cry it out for a minute to see if she would go back to sleep without intervention. Their bedroom door swung open, crashing against a wall, and they heard footsteps go around their bed, gently pushing open the door to their daughter's room. And, heard their daughter giggle while the airplane ornament that jingled when wound up being played. At first they were stunned and unable to get out of bed to check on her, but eventually they did. They found her asleep, with the ornament winding down to the end of its song. From this point, their occurrences were incredibly common. Rarely was it because of their daughter crying anymore. It was more as a playful activity. When Kyle got out of the shower, he would suddenly feel incredibly cold in the middle of summer in their smarmy, hot house. He yelled, "Enough!" which caused the bathroom door to open, shut, and an unhappy ghost march out of the bathroom. During the 7 months after their daughter was born that they lived there, their 3 dogs would occasionally stand up and follow apparently nothing around the house to a door, or car keys would get misplaced. None of this fazed Kyle or Jenny anymore. It was like living with a 5-year-old that they couldn't see. One day it got out of hand. They decided they were done living there, as they could afford a new house in a better, more suitable neighborhood, hopefully devoid of the supernatural, and were planning on renting out the house. In order to do this, they first replaced the door. Enter me and my other uncle Chris, who are both very realistic and think the idea of ghosts are just silly. We arrived to help put in a new door, me because I happened to be spending the weekend with my uncle, him because he's a carpenter by trade and helps the family with these tasks. About halfway through taking off the door, we hear a door open and shut. The house was empty aside from us 3 in the back bedroom, and decided it might be the wind. Kyle, of course, knew better, but Chris and I weren't worried about it. We got the door off and put it against the wall outside, when I saw the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. Chris's toolbox, which we were pulling hammers, screws, drivers out of, had been lifted off the porch, carried a foot suspended by nothing, and thrown off the deck, sprawling all the various tools onto the lawn. What the I've since reevaluated what I consider realistic, and have become more agnostic than anything, with a healthy serving of collective unconscious, a la Carl Jung, plus the idea of the connected mind being the universe, and us creating everything around us. Not my story, but my aunt's. Personally, I'm an atheist who doesn't believe there's a scientific explanation for paranormal activity, and would try to attribute most of the stuff I'm about to explain as pure coincidence. However, I do place some trust in my aunt. She's a bright woman, a fellow atheist ghoul, and a family-renowned skeptic like myself. That being said, she is absolutely convinced of what happened in her home and recalls it like it was yesterday. I'll try and give details as best I can, if anyone is curious. So my aunt lived up in coal country in Pennsylvania, but later moved to Harrisburg. It's a spooky place to begin with, at least in my humble opinion. There have been a fire burning under Centralia for 50 years. To this day, no one knows for sure how it started, and during the winter months, you can see the steam seeping up from the ground coal. The fire ripped through the underground caverns of coal and the town cemetery. Eventually, the population dwindled because of the safety hazards. Nothing remains except roads and, if I'm not mistaken, a handful of stubborn people. Anyway, on to the story. My aunt lived up there in coal country with her husband. The houses up there had basements dug into the ground where people would shovel coal into the furnace to warm the home. Her home was somewhere over a large coal dig. That's another weird fact. People were never sure if miners were digging for coal under their land. Sometimes the ground in the backyards would simply buckle. The man she brought the home from had lost his wife in a tragic accident. She fell down those steep stairs to the coal furnace in the basement. Tragically, he died the same way, fell to his death down the stairs, and died alone, incapacitated, at the bottom. So my aunt and her husband buy this place a few months later and immediately begin noticing odd things. Sometimes they'd be outside, hanging laundry on lines, and the radios would randomly switch stations from low frequencies had several stations my aunt enjoyed, to high frequencies. Country. My aunt absolutely loathed country music. At night, when the sun went down, the house would creak quite a bit, and doors would be slammed around the house when no one was present. Whenever they went into the basement to store some things or clean up, this would get worse. Whenever they made alterations to the house, the oddities only multiplied. One day my aunt recognized these occurrences were having an effect on her mental well-being. They were driving her mad, so she sat down with her husband and spoke to the man. This sounds weird to me as well, but she explained that they tried to drive a bargain with the old man, who they thought haunted the house. They screamed out loud to the guy that they wouldn't make alterations to the house for a few months if he would go peacefully. After 7 or 8 months, he was gone. Several years later, sold that house after it pretty much collapsed in on itself near the spot where the man had died at the bottom of those stairs. Could have been the coal mining below the home causing instability. I didn't know that having to express multiple times that you're an atheist should free you from believing in ghosts. I don't think that's necessarily a religious belief either. It's probably the opposite of a religious belief too. I think if you have spirituality or believe in a religion, you probably believe in an afterlife, not necessarily a ghost or a haunting. Think of a place to go after you live. So anyway, I don't know, but now that everyone knows you're an atheist, thank you for sharing. Have a good day. My girlfriend's father's metalworking shop is a very old concrete building, which half burnt down in the 1960s, supposedly killing a few workers. It was since then fixed, and he's owned it since the early 90s. A few of her family members have seen or heard things in the building. Even her father, who's a non-believer in the supernatural, has had a few unexplainable things happen to him while he's in there alone, such as whistling a song and stop and hear an unexplained voice finish the tune. But I digress. While we are there, we always have the radio on. The station we listen to is a strange station. When I say strange, I mean you can't pick it up anywhere else in the area, not even in a car right outside of the shop. It's a station that plays music from around the time the place burned. There's one spot in the shop that if you stand there, it causes interference with the antenna wire and makes the radio go extremely static. This is confirmed and repeatable. Anyway, her father had just left to go grab some stuff to eat, and I was there alone. I was doing fine until I heard a tool drop, and then the radio repeated in that same spot. Upon further investigation, I couldn't find a damned thing. Let's just say I was waiting for him outside when he arrived. I had a dream once that ended up coming true, kind of like OP's. I posted it a while back, but I feel like it would be a worthy contribution here. In the dream, I was riding the bus to school, talking to my best friend who sat across the aisle from me. She was in the school's band and she played the flute. She held up the flute case and there was a big hole in the side, closer to one of the ends, and that was it. That was the dream. I told her about it on the bus the next morning, Hey, I had this stupid dream last night about your flute case breaking. It seemed insignificant, and I don't know why I told her. Later that day, after her band class, she ran over to tell me that someone tripped over her flute case and broke it. She didn't have it with her, so she showed me that afternoon on the bus, and there it was. The hole was the same size and in the same place. Since then, I've had a couple of other dreams like that, but they weren't as vivid and I can't really remember them anymore. This happened to me a couple of years ago when there still used to be smoking compartments in trains. Some friends and I were going home by train when me and a friend decided to go for a cigarette. When we were on our way to the smoking compartment, we suddenly found ourselves in a part of the train that didn't look like anything we'd ever seen before. Everything from the grounds, the seats to the ceiling were chrome. What made it even stranger, this part of the train was packed with old people, and by old I mean 80 years plus, and we could smell them. It's not that they smelled unwashed or anything like that, but just old, like the kind of smell you get in a retirement home. The people were just sitting there, staring at us. None of them spoke a word while we made our way through the compartment, but they all looked at us as if we were ghosts. We left the compartment and got back in the normal part of the train again, where my friends and I both realized that we experienced exactly the same thing, and just how surreal that was. We smoked a cig and decided to go back to our other friends, and were pretty nervous about going through that strange part again. However, this time the train was completely normal, no sign of chrome or any old people at all. The most frustrating part was that none of the other guys believed a word of what we said when we explained that them our fucked up experience, and said they either made it up or smoked some crazy shit. Shortly after my wife and I got married, we were spending Thanksgiving with her parents and her brother and sister. I went to sleep at night and had this crazy fucked up dream about a farmhouse with a store in it that had a chicken coop in the back of the house. And behind the chicken coop, there was one of those old-timey wells, like a wishing well. I walked out back and was drawn to the well like it was pulling me, like a black hole. And there were these green monster things coming out of that. It was obviously trying to murder me. It was incredibly vivid, and it scared the fuck out of me, to the point that I bolted awake and was drenched in sweat. I hardly ever have nightmares, so it really stuck out in my mind. That morning at breakfast, I told the family the story, and as I was telling it, I noticed that my wife, her brother, and her sister turned white as fucking sheets, and the parents got this really strange look on their face as well. I asked what the deal was, and they said that I had just perfectly described a recurring nightmare that all of them had had as children. And then my in-laws went and dug out old photo albums that had pictures of the exact house or store, chicken coop, and water well in the backyard. It was the house my mother-in-law grew up in, and she swore up and down that it was haunted. I'd never heard that story, never seen those pictures, and didn't know a single thing about it, and yet somehow I exactly described it to them. We all thought it was pretty crazy that I had the same nightmare they did when they were growing up. There have been rumors of a ghost where I work from before I started here, like hearing steps, and one time the girls at administration had to work late and they swear someone knocked really hard at their door even if there was nobody else there at the time. I had to stay overnight alone a few times and haven't heard anything that I couldn't explain by either the wind or noises from outside or from neighbor houses. One day, though, at about 5 p.m., I was working next to two other people. Next to the office I work in, there's another office with a bathroom inside that's only used by my boss and his wife. She works in the company's finances on another office on another side of the house. We usually know that if the door is closed, it means one of them is in the bathroom. That day, the door was closed, but I didn't remember seeing anyone getting in, but was really concentrated in what I was doing, so didn't pay any attention to it. At one point, I turn around to ask something to the other people with me when the door handle wiggles, like if someone on the other side was trying to open a locked door. Does it 2 more times, and then the door opens. At this point, we were looking at the door, waiting for my boss or his wife to come out, but nobody does. I go check, and sure enough, the office and bathroom were both empty. I used to live in a very old, large house, over 300 years old. Many people who came to stay had weirdest things happen, but I, who had lived there for years, did not really have anything happen. I don't know what to make of their stories. Mainly, I just think that they are suggestible and freak themselves out late at night in a big old dark house that makes creaking sounds a lot, as old houses do. Some range from simply seeing ghosts to far more subtle things, but some really do seem strange if true. One time my uncle was staying. He's well educated and scientific and not prone to tall tales at all. He claims he went to the kitchen late at night to pour himself a glass of water. Having done so, he walked to the other end of the room but dropped the full glass. It shattered, but not a drop of water was to be found anywhere. Very strange, but maybe he simply was mistaken that he really filled up the glass, which is possible if you're still sleepy. The only thing of note that happened to me was hearing a loud crash from the other room One time, I went through to find a largish log, bit of wood, lying on the floor about a foot long and 4 to 5 inches in diameter. It looked like it was once part of some furniture. I had no idea how it got there. It did not come from anything in the room. There was a fireplace in that room, but there was a guard in front of it blocking it all, but a bit at the top, and the wood was found about 15 feet away. It seems unlikely a bird could have lifted it in the first place and then drop it down the chimney. Birds did nest there, though, occasionally, and for it to bounce over the fire guard and end up on the other side of the room, there are no overhanging trees, and as I said, it had definitely been used before, in furniture or something, not fresh off a tree. I don't think someone could have thrown it into the chimney either, as it was very high up. Possible, but not the kind of thing people would do in a quiet village, and they would have to walk far onto our garden to stand a chance. Not sure what to make of that.